G'day poker people, welcome back. After an absolutely brutal downswing in the $60 an hour 1-3 challenge, I'm nowhere near winning $60 an hour at 1-3. In fact, it's less than $30 an hour, which wouldn't be an awful 1-3 win rate, but I know I can do better. Really hoping to turn things around in this next session. I went back to Derby Lane a week after the previous session because they were running a promo where if you had the highest hand within an hour, you won a brand new TV. Don't know how I will count the TV towards the win rate in the challenge. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but I was definitely keen to put in more volume. I only had 5 hours left before I got my $50 for the month of November and collected another $500 bonus. So I was looking to knock out at least 5 hours today. So let's not waste any more time and see if we can get out of this downswing. Let's go. So we are back in the mix, and this time it's for 1,000 bangers and no more short buying in the game. I honestly don't think it did much to help me go off tilt in the last session. Probably better off just playing deep and trying to make EV off our opponents and just trying to not tilt monkey off as much this session. So let's hop into the first hand and see if we can at least not do that in the first hand. So I am under the gun with pocket sixes. I raise it up to 15, then a passive small blind 3 bets to 56, and then a action player in the big blind cold calls the 56. I don't think there's anything to do but just call here. We're 900 effective with the 3 better, so we're definitely getting a good spot to set mine, particularly since we have position on 2 people. So I throw in the call. Fingers crossed we hit that set, and then the board is King Jack 6, baby. Let's go. We hit the set. What a spot for it. Small blind C bets for 50, and then the big blind calls a 50. Now the action's on me here, and there would be some merit to slow playing this hand in position. I actually think when the small blind C bets to such a small size, the range isn't super strong and probably has a lot of like pocket queens, ace queen type stuff that will fold to a raise. But the reason I do like raising here is the big blind cold called. I think they are going to have a lot of strong king X combinations, and even if they have something like a gut shot, being that they're an action player, they're probably not going to be likely to make a fold with any draw. So I think it's a mandatory raise spot in my opinion. So I raise it up to 200, and then the small blind goes all in for 844. Happy days there, seeing them shove. The big blind gets out of the way, and we are not going to slow roll this villain who very likely has ace king or aces in all honesty. Some possibility they have a bigger set, but we are not that risk averse where we're going to be folding a set here. So I throw in the snap call, and then the small blind shows ace queen of spades. So they actually have a monster draw on this board, the Broadway draw with the nut flush draw. So we're going to have to fade a lot on the run out, and then the turn is the jack of diamonds are locking it up for us. We make a full house. Doesn't even matter what the river is, which is fortunate because the river was a 9 of spades and they did get there with their nut flush draw, but it's not going to be enough to beat my full house. Let's freaking go. G'day poker people, I'm here today to tell you about my new favourite app that is helping me improve my game day by day, and it is the Fastroll Poker app. Essentially what it is, it's a hand history tracker for live poker players, something akin to Poker Tracker for online poker, but they're bridging the gap and they're making it for live poker and following a very user-friendly, intuitive software. You can input the hand histories literally right after you're done playing them in a matter of seconds. It takes me about 15 to 30 seconds after I've played each hand, and they're stored on a database inside the app. And the beautiful thing about that is after the session's over, I can go back and look over the hands I've played and see what I'm doing well, and more commonly where I've punted off a lot of money, and thus helping me know what the leaks in my games are and then how I can plug them. So I cannot recommend this app strongly enough if you are a serious poker player who wants to use this tool to help improve your game. I've been offered many sponsorship deals in the past from things I think were a bit shady. This is the first thing I actually wanted to promote because I think it is actually a very good tool which will help you guys actually improve your poker game. So if you want to try it out, use the code LEBETS when you purchase an annual subscription, and you'll get the first month free. If you don't like it after the first month, you're totally fine to cancel without charge, but I really think you guys are going to love this app and can't recommend it strongly enough. It's a massive tool to help your game. So use the code LEBETS on an annual subscription and you'll get the first month free. For now though, let's fast roll back into the gambling. So I mentioned this briefly in the previous hand, but there was an action player in the game who was to my direct right, and he started noticing that people were table changing to try and get in his game, and then he confesses to me, he's like, I can't stand when these guys do this. They just always like desperately try to play on my table, and then they never even give any action when they come to my table. It just really pisses me off. And then I'm like, yeah, I bet that would annoy the shit out of me too if they didn't give any action after they try to get to your table so much. And this is why, and I get a lot of pushback when I say part of the rules of this challenge is I'm not allowed to table change, but this is the reason why. Like, the recreational players who don't care about winning money playing poker and just want to gamble, they don't like when you come and you bum hunt them and you don't give them any action. Like, if you give them action, it's a little bit better, or you're at least like good mates with them and that, but like, just come over and try and play poker with them and then try and play tight. It's such a bad thing for the game overall. And my worry is that it's going to alienate a lot of the recreational players that we do want in the poker community. So yeah, just wanted to get on my little soapbox there because I now have evidence that the recreational players do not like when you bum hunt them. So if you are a reg out there watching this, please keep that in mind next time you want to table change to play with one specific person, and that's why I don't table change at all. But anyway, let's get back into the poker hands. So we've got an under the gun straddle on for this hand, and I know because it's me, I'm the straddle. So anyway, there's two limpers before the action's on my straddle with pocket tens. What a spot to wake up with a premium. I go ahead and raise it up to 35, and then both the limpers call actually. So we're three ways to a flop of ace, ace, 7 with 2 diamonds. When the big blind checks it over to me, I think this is a good spot to go ahead and bet for a bit of thin value. I think both of the opponents have plenty of pocket pairs worse than mine in their range. Plus we can get value from some diamond draws. Don't want to go too crazy with sizing or anything because I think the opponents also have plenty of ace-x combinations in their range. But even with that in mind, I think it's still a good spot to go ahead and bet for thin value. So I go ahead and make it 40, and then only the under the gun limper calls. So heads up to a term which is the 5 of spades, and I actually really like this term because if my opponent does have a pocket pair worse than mine, unless they have pocket 5 specifically, this turn card is going to be a card that they like if they have pocket 8s or pocket 9s, even 8-7 or something. So I think there might be some merit to continuing to bet for really thin value here. Still have to be worried that the opponent does have an ace-x combination, being that they limped under the gun. They're probably likely to have a lot of offsuit combinations, so I do have to proceed with a bit of caution, but I think there is some merit to going ahead and betting for thin value here. So I go ahead and make it 80, and then the under the gun player doesn't think too long before throwing in the call. So happy to not get raised here, but I definitely don't think we're out of the woods. If my opponent does have an ace-x hand, I think it's likely that they would slow play in position, particularly if they cannot beat ace-king, for example, since that's probably a hand they're worried that I do have. So we're heads up to a river, which is the beautiful ace of spades. Now, the reason I say this is beautiful, it is a lot less likely my opponent does have an ace now, and a lot more likely that they do have a pocket pair worse than the tens, which will give them a full house. So I actually think it's pretty likely that they'll continue to call a bet here. Definitely getting pretty thin, but if they do have one of those pocket pairs or even a 7x, I don't think they'll fold. If we do get raised here after we bet, we know we're running to quads because we are not getting raised as a bluff on this river. I'll tell you what. If I go ahead and bet 120, maybe could go a little bit larger. Like, I don't think pocket 8s would fold to like 175 when the pot's this big, but maybe losing a bit of EV with a smaller bet here, but I went ahead and make it 120. Then the under the gun play is in the tank, probably a good 20 seconds or so before throwing in that call. You love to see it. I show my pocket tens, and then unsurprisingly the villain's hand goes in the muck. So we're getting thin value in the 1-3 streets. This is exactly what we want to boost our numbers for this challenge. Let's go. This next hand is an interesting one. I feel like maybe I played myself a little bit, but let's get into the hand and let me know what you think of it. So a tight aggressive cutoff opens it to 10, and I'm on the button with pocket queens, baby. Another premium. I go ahead and 3-bet it to 35. Maybe could go a little bit larger at 1-3. I think opponents are going to be relatively inelastic between like 35 and 45, so missing a bit of EV here. Not a huge mistake though. I go ahead and make it 35, and then a tight aggressive small blind cold calls, and the initial razor calls as well. So we our three ways to a flop of 6-5-5 rainbow. When the action checks to me, I really like this board when I have pocket queens because I think in this dynamic, both the small blind and the cutoff are going to have plenty of overpairs to the 6x that are worse than my pocket queens. So my initial instinct is to go ahead and bet really big here, figuring my opponent's going to be inelastic with those hands. So I go ahead and make it 75. Then I think to myself, is this like really face up? Did I just have a massive overpair when I 3-bet pre-flop and then I go ahead and bomb this flop? Maybe it's a bit face up, and I get even more concerned that I've made a mistake when the small blind goes into the tank for probably a good 30 seconds before folding. Did not like seeing that, and then the action's back on the cutoff, who also tanks probably another 30 seconds before folding as well. And the fact that they were tank folds really makes me worried that maybe I got a bit too greedy with a large C-bet here, and my concerns are at least semi-confirmed when both the players confessed to me that they did have overpairs on this board. Now, I know we're at a poker game and people lie all the time when playing poker, so I can't just take them for their word on that. But part of me does believe them with the tank folds, with them just having a large prevalence of those in their range. And I really do wonder if I missed EV with such a large C-bet here. This next hand starts off on the beautiful note because we have a button straddle on. You'll love to see it. And then things go from good to better when we peel pocket aces in the cutoff, a passive big blind open limps, and then I go ahead and ISO raise it to 35. I get called by a tight aggressive button as well as the limper. So we go three ways to a flop of king 6-4 rainbow. When the action checks to me, I think it's a good spot to go ahead and get a bit of a value with a C-bet. With a hand this strong, I go ahead and make it 35. And then the button goes ahead and raises us to 175 after almost no tanking. Big blind gets out of the way and we are not going to be folding this hand here. Part of me is pretty tempted to go ahead and 3-bet. I think the button is going to have a lot of ace king specifically in his range when he didn't 3-bet pre-flop because he's worried about not hitting, and now he's hit, so he's putting money in the pot. But that is potentially a bit of an overplay. We are going to deny the opponent an opportunity to bluff on the turn if we do that, if they do have the weaker part of their range. And we're kind of just maximizing damages when my opponent does have pocket sixes or pocket fours. So I do just decide to play it a bit more cautious and throw in the call here. So it heads up to a turn, which is the queen of diamonds, putting out backdoor diamonds. I go ahead and check it over to the villain, and then they check back. So now I think their range is like either really, really weak and they just gave up on a bluff on the turn, or they do have ace king and they're trying to play it a bit more cautious, being that they're worried about me having king queen or pocket queens on this turn card. So they check it back and we get a free river, which is the 7 of diamonds, putting in backdoor diamonds. Now I definitely want to go ahead and bet here, value targeting ace king specifically, and it just becomes a sizing decision. Part of me is tempted to go something like 500, just figuring the opponent will not fold ace king after they've taken this line ever. But then I sit on that thought a bit and remember my previous hand with the pocket queens where I got too greedy, and I'm like, okay, we are playing in a tighter 1-3 game. I think opponent's going to be pretty risk averse, and I might be a bit too greedy to go with an overbet. So I decide to downsize a little bit to a 300, and then the button tanks for maybe like 15 seconds before calling. I show my pocket aces, villain's hand goes in the muck, and he later tells me that he had ace king. I do 100% believe him, but I guess I'll always be left wondering, would have he called a larger bet on the river? Let me know what you think in the comments below. This next hand starts off when the same villain from the previous hand opens to 10 under the gun. Then the action folds to my big blind where I peel pocket nines, and typically I don't like calling over 3x opens, even closing the action in the big blind. But when we're 1.4 thousand effective with the villain, calling a 3x open seems a lot more reasonable in a 1-3 game. So I do throw in the call, and we're heads up to a flop of 10-8-4 rainbow. I check it over to the villain who c-bets for 15, and I think there's nothing to do but just call here. If we did check raise for equity denial, I think we're just denying the villain an opportunity to continue bluffing on this board. Which would be bad. We'd rather check raise with a stronger hand or a weaker one as a bluff. So I just throw in the call, and then we're heads up to the turn, which is the jack of diamonds. I check it over to the villain again, who goes ahead and bets 45. So actually an overbet of the pot, which leaves me pretty concerned. The villain is going to have all of the overpairs in their range, Jack 10, pocket Jacks, 10s, 8s. So there's plenty we lose to here, but the reason I am tempted to call is because if the opponent has pretty much any Broadway combination, ace king, king queen, ace queen, they have turned a straight draw, so it could be likely that they're barreling with all of those overcard combinations, which definitely makes calling a lot more tempting. So I do throw in a pretty speculative call here, though maybe bluff catching at 1-3 isn't the best strategy, but if they are using all of those combinations, it's definitely going to be a plus EV call with pocket 9s here. So we are still heads up to a river, which is the 6 of clubs. I check it over to the villain, who goes ahead and bets 175. So yeah, still my logic on the turn was that they have all of the overcard combinations with their Broadway hands. But I do think, in all likelihood, a tight opponent who played ace-king really passive in the previous hand is probably not taking a bluff line with all of those combinations. I definitely think they're going to have some give-ups with their ace-high, and when they are giving us such an awful price for us to hero call, and I discount some of their bluffs, they're left with a higher proportion of value bets here, namely, still all the overpairs, Jack 10 sets, and calling with pocket 9s here would be awful against that range of hands. We'd rather call with a Jack or a 10 if I was to hero call here, but I don't think pocket 9s is a hand to do it with. So I do decide to make the discipline lay down and fold my pocket 9s in this spot, and I'm pretty happy with it. Look. Next hand up, we got the under the gun straddle back on. You love to see it. And then the action folds to my button with ace 4 offsuit. I raise it up to 25, and then I get called by a passive small blind and straddle. So we go 3 ways to a flop of king 8 deuce with 2 clubs. When the action checks to me, even I'm not ambitious enough to bluff into 2 passive opponents on a king high board, so I check it back, take the free turn, which is the 5 of diamonds, giving us a gut shot. Small blind checks it over to the straddle, who bets out for 25, and I think there is plenty of merit to just folding in this spot, but I would actually rather continue to call here. I mean, there is some remote possibility that our ace high is good when the opponent chooses a small bet size. I think they're going to have plenty of draws in their range, but not enough draws where we can bluff them off, because I think they're going to have a few weaker pairs as well, weaker kings, 8x, even like pocket 6s wouldn't totally shock me when they choose such a small size and they're just trying to charge draws. So I do decide to throw in the call here. Definitely pretty speculative, particularly with someone left to act who actually calls as well. It's kind of like worst case scenario. So whatever the case, we are still 3 ways to a river, which is the 5 of hearts, repeating bottom pair. Small blind checks it over the straddle, who goes ahead and bets 25 again. Now I think that their range is, it's a lot less likely that it's a bluff. I mean, if they were trying to bluff, they probably would use a larger sizing, but it makes it a lot more likely that they are betting a smaller pair for thin value here, something like 8x, pocket 6s, that just really doesn't want to check fold, so they're just putting in a little bit of a blocker bet here. And when they are putting in a blocker bet, I think it's a good spot for us to go ahead and bluff. Some worry that the small blind did call with a 5 on the turn, but I think they would have at least considered leading that on the river. So I think it's a good spot to go ahead and try and raise, fold the small blind off of an ace high combination, and fold the straddle off of an 8x combination or a worse pair. So I decide to go for it. Want to use a large size as well, particularly since we're trying to make a passive opponent fold a pair. So I go ahead and raise it up to 250. The small blind folds really quick, and then the straddle calls really quick. Well, shit, that is not what we wanted to see. I go ahead and show my hand, and then the villain shows 9-5 offsuit. So wow, they actually down bet on the river, probably on purpose to induce a bluff, which is actually a brilliant play. I fell right into their trap. GG's to the villain, they got me on this one, and definitely making notes. This opponent can be tricky the next time I play them. Next hand's a cheeky little fun one. And it starts off on a good note because we have the under the gun straddle on. You love to see it. And then I'm in the hijack with pocket 2s. I raise it up to 25. Probably a little bit too loose with this hand in middle position in a straddle pot, but folding is boring. I go ahead and make it 25, and then I get called by passive button. So it heads up to a flop of ace, king, deuce, all spades. So we do hit the set on a monotone board. Now, if you've been watching this vlog for any amount of time, you know I like checking when I'm out of position as a pre-flop aggressor as a default play. So I do check it here, but I wish I thought about it a little bit more because I actually think there's a lot of incentive to go ahead and bet in this spot. Just because my opponent is passive, I think they're going to have a lot of checkbacks on this board. Like even some of their stronger ace-x might check back, being worried about the flush, being worried I have ace-king. So it might be a good spot to deviate from the norm and go for a bit of value here. We're getting towards the end of the session though, and I think fatigue is starting to kick in, so I just go ahead and check it over to the villain. Don't like this play in the long run though. Whatever the case, unsurprisingly, they do check back, so we get a free turn, and I'm really glad we do, because it's a 2 of diamonds giving us quads. Let's freaking go. It's Derby Lane, so we automatically are going to get paid $500, and we're probably going to go on the board to try and win one of those brand new TVs as well. Now, I definitely want to go ahead and bet this hand. Like I said, I think my opponent has plenty of ace-x checkbacks on the flop, and pretty much any pair with a spade will probably call a smaller bet here. So I go ahead and make it 40, and then the villain folds pretty quickly. So obviously they didn't have anything and there was no value to get from them here, but we don't care. We table our hand and we go on the board to win a new TV. We get the instant payout of $500, and there's a little bit of a sweat. We have to hold for half an hour to win the TV, and then with about 5 minutes to go, someone hits quad sixes and they end up beating us for the TV. So we didn't have to worry about how the TV affected the win rate, but still not complaining. Remake quads, and because it's Derby Lane, I get paid out the instant 500 for a high hand. Let's go. So there you have it. Those were the most interesting hands we played over this 9-hour and 55-minute session. So absolutely mammoth session. We actually played all the hours of the promotion. The promotion lasted 10 hours, but got to take some time off to go poo-poo and whatnot. So very happy that I played this long. And unlike the other time when I played a really long session because I was on tilt, I think I played really well for this session. Got to give myself an A grade for sure. There are a few mistakes in there. Definitely got too greedy with my pocket queens, I think. But at least I was able to bounce back, and the next time I had a thick value hand, I knew to down bet because the dynamics of the game were tighter. I think I made plenty of good thin value bets, plenty of good bluffs. Even if they didn't work out, I still like my thinking behind them. And, you know, maybe I should be betting pocket twos with the set on the board, but yeah, that's a minor mistake if it is one at all. So just overall, really happy with my performance today, particularly considering how long the session went. It's a lot harder to play well for that long period of time, so really happy with it. And my great performance was rewarded with some even greater results. Won 1,597 on the 1-3 game. You absolutely love to see numbers that big. And because we did get over 5 hours of play, we are well above 50 hours played in the month of November, which means we are eligible to pick up the $500 bonus, meaning the win rate for the 1-3 challenge is definitely better than it was when we closed out the last session. Of course, we are still ages away from the $60 an hour mark, so you know I had to come back in December to try and close the difference and play another 50 hours for the $500 bonus for December. So that's what will happen in the next vlog. It'll be our first session back in December. For now though, I'm out of here. Do svidania.